Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone, welcome. Avant que je commence, I want to say, I know I sound like a teenager, but I am in fact 30, but that's because I'm going through a bit of a transition. We are here on the unceded territories of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe peoples. Nous devons être reconnaissants de l'histoire et le présent de notre pays. C'est le génocide réel et ça continue. C'est à nous de changer la course, travailler dur pour la justice. Arrêter les plaisanteries et les remplacer avec des actions concrètes. Je suis tellement heureux aujourd'hui d'être ici avec notre caucus vert pour annoncer nos priorités pour ce Parlement. More than anything, as we watch the climate disasters roll out across this country, from my home in BC and now also out east, there is nothing more top of mind than an immediate response to the climate emergency. That being said, climate policy is all policy, and all policy can be climate policy. So our focus on democracy, our focus on housing, our focus on health and mental health, c'est toutes les politiques sur l'urgence climatique. And as we go through, we hope that our recovery from the pandemic is one of transformation. We currently do not feel like we can support the speech from the throne due to these climate emergencies and the fact that it will not address the need to get to 1.5 degrees. Ça ne vraiment répond pas adéquatement à l'urgence climatique et qui manque des éléments importants comme l'assurance médicaments. Cela dit, nous voulons et nous allons travailler avec n'importe qui pour s'assurer que la relance soit une relance verte. Before being Greens, Elizabeth May and Mike Morrice are MPs for Saanich Gulf Islands and Kitchener Centre. They will work for you, for their constituents, before any partisanship. I am also happy to confirm that Elizabeth May will continue as our parliamentary leader. J'invite tout le monde à travers le pays, y compris les députés dans la Chambre des communes, à nous rejoindre. Chaque mois, chaque semaine, chaque jour compte dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Si on travaille ensemble, nous pouvons créer un avenir florissant, durable, juste et équitable. Together, working with absolutely everyone, we will be stronger and we can create our future together. I'd like to give an opportunity for our MPs to speak, starting with our parliamentary leader, Elizabeth May.
First, I want to say how extraordinarily grateful I am for the leadership of Dr. Amita Kuttner. They are an extraordinary human being whom I love dearly, and the bravery of stepping forward at this time to lead our party should be acknowledged with the deepest of gratitude. As a parliamentary, and I'm grateful to continue as parliamentary leader, I think it's been clear in the brief time in which we've been back in this parliament, and since the 41st parliament has started, that their very first emergency debate was on exactly what's happening right now in British Columbia, looking at the outcome of COP26, which both Mike Morrice and I attended. We failed collectively as a species and as a group of governments to live up to what we promised in Paris, which is to hold global average temperature increase to no more than 1.5 degrees, if at all possible, and as far below 2 degrees as possible. My priority remains very, very focused on the critical importance of improving Canada's performance before 2030. Net zero by 2050 is a dangerous, illusory target that's not grounded in science. And yet everything the current government is doing, as laudable as many individual programs may be, it's not enough. Pour moi, le but, c'est clair, on doit atteindre le niveau de 1,5 degrés Celsius et pas plus haut que ça. Parce que maintenant, nous expérimentons maintenant sur la planète une augmentation de température à 1,1 degré Celsius. 1,1, et nous avons eu les canicules qui sont vraiment désastres. We had a heat dome this summer, as we all know, in which, and I think it doesn't really sink in sometimes, almost 600 people in my province died in 4 days because of the heat dome. And then we had 1,600 wildfires that continued all summer and lit and burnt to the ground in 15 minutes. They never had time to get the fire truck out of the fire station before the fire truck burned up inside the fire station. And now we have this atmospheric river after river that hits us with flooding, loss of lives, loss of homes, loss of farms. Well, it's clearly a disaster. It's clearly an emergency. It needs to be treated as an emergency with response from the whole of government, including canceling the Trans Mountain Pipeline, stopping all fossil fuel subsidies, banning fracking, and working to ensure that the workers in the fossil fuel sector are protected with a Just Transition Act. I'm very committed to pharmacare. I'm very committed to reconciliation. There are many, many urgent issues that we will face in this Parliament. But I want to turn the floor over to my colleague, the Extraordinary Member of Parliament for Kitchener Centre.
Let me start by saying thank you to you all for being here, both in person and online. My thanks as well to Dr. Kuttner for stepping in at such a critical time for the party and for your leadership. And to my colleague, Elizabeth, for your leadership in the House of Commons. For my part, I'll reiterate, number one, first of all, to continue to expect that Greens will work across party lines respectfully to focus on the priorities of our neighbors and of Canadians across the country, whether that comes to ensuring that we address the unaffordability of housing, that homes should be for people, not commodities for investors. As we work towards truly universal health care, which includes pharmacare, includes addressing gaps in mental health supports, includes dental and eye care, and ensures that we address the climate emergency following the science and centering climate justice as we do so. Thank you all again for being here. I'll now pass it back to our interim leader for any questions that you might have. Thank you again.
Merci beaucoup, Elisabeth et Mike. Et je suis prêt pour les questions in English and en français.
Oui, ici, Hélène Buzetti des Coop de l'information. Monsieur Kuttner, j'aimerais juste savoir, qu'en est-il de l'entente avec Annamie Paul? On ne nous a pas donné les détails. Je crois qu'il y avait une demande de compensation financière. Où en sommes-nous avec ça au Parti vert? Merci.
Bon, je ne sais pas entièrement. J'ai commencé dans ce poste mercredi dernier. Je ne sais pas tous les détails en ce moment.
Est-ce que quelqu'un de vous saurait? OK.
Désolée.
Okay. Mais donc, vous confirmez qu'elle n'est plus du tout dans le parti.
Oui.
Mais est-ce qu'il y a encore une cause devant les tribunaux?
Je ne pense pas.
Okay. Merci.
Merci.
Bonjour, Boris Proulx du Devoir, bienvenue à Ottawa. Toujours sur un peu la même question, je ne sais pas si vous avez été beaucoup impliqué dans les discussions impliquant Mme Paul, mais j'aimerais savoir si vous avez une réflexion sur quel était le problème et comment vous allez pouvoir rebâtir ça, oui. Disons, la confiance envers le Parti vert. Okay.
J'étais un peu dehors de tous les problèmes dans le parti. C'était vraiment une période très difficile pour tout le monde. Pour moi, c'était douloureux, regarder tous les conflits. Mais je pense qu'en ce moment, j'ai beaucoup de confiance dans le parti. Tous les membres, tous les bénévoles, nous sommes encore, je pense, sur la même page pour travailler ensemble pour l'avenir.
Il y avait certaines critiques par rapport à la chef, Mme
oui.
Paul, provenant de l'aile québécoise du parti.
Oui.
Quelles sont vos relations avec l'aile québécoise du parti? Comment vous allez pouvoir reconstruire les ponts?
Bon, je suis on avait une réunion il y a quelques jours avec les Québécoises. J'ai hâte de travailler avec eux. Le Québec et les enjeux québécois sont très, très importants pour moi et aussi le parti, et y compris défendre la langue française.
You've said, Murray Wolf from the Canadian Press, you've said you want to heal the party, and I take from that you're referring to the months of infighting. What do you think personally you can do that others have failed to do to clamp down on all the bickering, the apparent transphobia and anti-Semitism within the party, and turn the Greens into a credible political force again?
There's a few things. I think the healing is partially about the conflicts, but I think there's also a wider truth that there have been few people within the party that have been involved in that. The majority of the membership is not involved in these conflicts. What I can do is, I hope, facilitate. I am one person, and I cannot promise to do everything myself, surely. But I hope to offer myself first to put out my trust to everyone and to guide everyone if they are willing on this healing journey, but it is up to everyone to step up. I also think the healing is not just for those who have been at each other's throats, one would say, but everyone hurt by the fact that this has happened who were not involved in it. And I'm here to listen, to love.
I mean, but listening and loving might not be enough. Would you be prepared to take tough disciplinary action if that's required?
Absolutely. We have a code of conduct. We have a list of principles that we're supposed to follow. If people's behavior is not in line with those, then they won't be welcome. But I believe it's important at this point that we have the attempt at a process of reconciliation where they are given the chance to understand how their behavior was harmful and to work through it before. And yes, of course, listening and loving is not all one can do to heal, but I hope to provide the space where people can actually come through some process of conflict resolution.
Anya Kidadeglia, National Post. Do you have a specific plan or strategy for the next 6 months or however long your term will be in terms of how you plan to bring the party back together and heal some of what's happened?
Yes, so I think it does start with a listening piece. And to me, I'm trying to sense the system. I'm trying to understand how the party is, how everyone is doing. So my primary way about that will be to make sure that I'm connected with caucus, always supporting their work, connected with shadow cabinet to make sure that they are supporting caucus and vice versa, and making sure that I'm working on federal council as an equal member in collaboration. But then to start by listening to all the EDAs, the members, the volunteers, every candidate across the country to see what it is, how they feel, what they need, and put together a plan and my recommendations for what changes can be made and really to provide to make sure we can be ready for next election.
And do you think there's a need for structural change? I know that one of the things that Annamie Paul has said, power in the party was decentralized. She spoke about that last night. Do you think there's a need to look and potentially review the structure of the party and the way that it works so that you can avoid the same situation happening again?
A structural review is a fantastic idea. Personally, I don't like hierarchy. I like decentralization. But I also know that it can't be my opinions that go into this, but rather recommendations for how this party can function best with its values.
Oh, over here.
Après. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Could I just add to that question? Sorry, David. Just wanted to add to that question, if that's okay. I'll also want to highlight that Dr. Kuttner has both been a candidate in a general election and in the leadership race. And I think their experience with the party is part of what's going to inform their approach to the healing that you've already heard about. In addition to how appreciative I am for the ways that Dr. Kuttner has already been engaging across the party. Their presentation at our virtual general meeting just this past weekend, their approach amongst us with the caucus, it just reinforces the words you're hearing is exactly what my experience has been, and is part of my confidence and my excitement for Dr. Kuttner to be coming in at such a critical time for the party. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. You're going to make me grin. Yes.
Sorry about that. I thought you were
No,
leaving.
It's okay. No, I'm not.
David Thurton, CBC News. Very good to see you. I guess the first question I just want to ask is, what are the Green Party's 3 priorities of this parliament? Not too clear. Obviously, climate is one of them, but other than climate, what are those 2 other priorities? And Dr. Kuttner, what do you see as your role as interim leader for the next, 6 months of the party?
So I would say our priorities are, indistinguishable in a sense. The things that we put forward are a kind of a whole package for transformation, but they are focused on climate, on social justice, and by that I mean well-being, to make sure that every single person in this country has access to their full rights, to health, to water, to food, to housing, understanding that that is essential to life, and that needs to be provided, and that needs to be part of the pandemic response. And also true reconciliation, or I would go so far as to say decolonization, and a new approach, especially with everything that has come forward this year in understanding Canada as a colonial and genocidal state. Beyond that, I think that the priorities that we will see being shown up are details within that. It goes into transportation, it goes into housing, goes into pharmacare, certainly mental health. That one's a big one for me personally. So that's where I put it for now, but depending on what comes up, it will show itself differently. The conversion therapy ban, big one for me personally as well. My role is, I think, slightly different than your average interim leader, because I think that right now coming in to say that I would just be trying to keep everything running and then help run a leadership contest is not quite it. So my role, I hope, is to re-solidify with everyone within the party, to start the process of regrowth, to make sure we heal, to make sure we fundraise, and also to make sure that we run a good leadership contest.
I want to ask about just the response you gave to my colleague at the Canadian Press. You said that the conflicts in the party have been among a few people. Who are those people? And if you can't say who they are, is it on social media? Is it among members? Is it among leadership candidates? Is it among federal council? Is it among the fund? Where do you see those few conflicts?
Well, I think I'll start by saying I said before, I did just start last week. And over this last year, I stepped back a bit because it was painful for me to watch so many people that I cared about go through this, whatever that was. So I am not sure the exact people at this time. There are a lot of opinions circulating out there, certainly on social media, etc. But it is not clear to me yet where everybody stands, who the players are, if that is even a reasonable way to approach it. What I do see is that we're in a place where people have multiple truths and lots of hurt feelings. And so to approach that, I have no interest in antagonizing anybody, in deciding anybody thinks anything other than what I can actually have a conversation with them about.
Merci. Je ne sais pas si on a le temps de prendre d'autres questions, mais je... Ah, d'accord. Oui, allez-y.
Opératrice, avons-nous des questions au téléphone?
No, we have no questions on the telephone lines.
Vas-y, tu peux y aller.
J'aimerais savoir si vous êtes intéressé à vous faire élire dans une éventuelle élection partielle ou si vous êtes prêt même à mener des élections générales si jamais le gouvernement tombait. Là.
Si ça tombe dans la prochaine... Si 8 mois, oui. Mais sinon, je ne suis pas sûre encore si je veux me présenter. Mais je pense, aller à travers le pays et travailler avec tout le monde, les ACE, certainement au Québec.
Quand vous dites aller à travers le pays, est-ce que vous voulez dire que s'il y a des élections générales, vous ne resteriez pas dans votre circonscription trop longtemps?
Oui, et même s'il n'y a pas des élections, je vais voyager.
Me again. You mentioned about the financial situation of the party and how much of a priority it is. What is the financial situation of the party? And can you reflect that in real terms, what that means either for representation, democracy, or just, having a headquarters here in Ottawa? What is the situation like?
The hardest questions are the ones I actually don't have answers for. And this is one of them. I don't know exactly how the finances are. And so the way I'm approaching it is we need our strength back, so I'm going to fundraise as hard as I possibly can with everybody. And that will allow us to do stuff like get staff back, because that the staff layoffs I'm aware of. That's really important for us to be able to get our work back underway. Yeah, I mean, I really don't know the details of it. And so I think that it to some extent, I've sensed a little bit of, I suppose, multiple opinions on the situation. And since I don't actually know the numbers or the details, I'm not sure. But because of that, I need to step past it and just get us to a place that's certainly strong in everybody's opinion.
And just can you explain why do you think there was this precipitous drop in fundraising? Do you attribute it just because of what we saw over the last couple of months? What was the reason? What's your thinking behind that?
Again, I'm not sure. I would say yes. If you are looking to support a party, which you'd hope to be getting something out of it, and you're not getting the sense that you're going to get a return on your investment, you certainly wouldn't be donating. So I think that no matter where people were on any opinions on things, it's difficult to support something you're not sure about.
Hi, me again as well. You're here as the interim leader, obviously. Do you have any plans, or are you considering running for the permanent leadership?
I'm not planning to run for the permanent leadership. In fact, I'm going to try to get out of it, and if anyone suggests that I do.
And anything more you can tell us about when we can expect that in 6 months, my understanding is, and what that process might look like, what that race might look like?
Yeah, so since I went through it last time, I'm hyper aware of some things that I would like to make sure do and don't happen in the next leadership race. It's going to be a collective process of figuring out how it goes. The rules by our constitution is that it has to start within 6 months of my appointment as interim, and we have then 24 months to run it. I really hope that it's not that long. We could look at launching it sooner than 6 months, but with the amount of strengthening work I think we have to do, it would be good to take our time with that to make sure we're really strong and ready and have the rules in place in a way that we're very sure of.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether it's a bit too early to rule out becoming the leader, given the rather rapturous response you got at the conference and Mike's generous words there. But what I did want to ask is, do you think, with your age and very interesting background, what will you be doing to try and broaden the appeal of the Greens beyond people who are solely interested in the environment? I mean, will you be looking at other issues such as housing, social justice? I mean, you just talk about making the Greens more attractive, I suppose, to people who may not be very political?
I think a lot of why people aren't political is because they see nothing in our government and in the parties that represent the status quo, and I would go to say that's almost all the other parties, if not all of them. And due to that, there's no interest in participation. People feel, even if they're not disenfranchised, they certainly feel that way. And I think the Greens represent something that nobody else does, and that is a willingness to always tell the truth, to question the way we function, the way we approach partisanship instead of collaboration. All these things are different. And our desire for democratic reform, as we see as a necessity. So those things for sure. And I don't think that we are a one-issue party at all. We are an every-issue party. But for us, there is no distinction between all other policies and climate policy. Everything needs to be about climate justice, because that's our future. We're in the middle of an emergency. So certainly, if we focus just on climate, we're not actually doing a good job on climate. So we have to be willing and ready to talk about every single policy that comes up, every single concern that anyone has, especially to do with the way they live their lives, to make sure that we can have a system and an economy based on well-being, community strength, and everything that we need to have in terms of changes in communities, transportation, and certainly, I would hope, strengthening the municipal level to be able to respond to the climate emergency.
I'll check one last time if we have a question on the phone, operator.
We do not have any questions at this time. Il n'y a pas de questions pour l'instant.
This concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you, everyone.